Hey, what's up, good people? It's your boy JD. Hey, so on this episode, we're going to talk about leading with authenticity. So being real and being true to oneself, right? Are you a real leader or are you an authentic leader? Right. So that's what we're going to talk about here today. I'm one of those people you always hear the saying, never forget where you came from. I'm one of those people, right? I just had my retirement ceremony and a lot of people, that were talking were surprised that I made it to the level I did because I never changed. That's not necessarily true because I had to change in order to adapt into different leadership styles and different echelons. But I stayed true to myself and authentic to who I was, the principles, the ethics that I stood for, the moral ground that I stood on, those type of things never wavered, never changed. I stayed true to myself in that regard. So anybody who knew me knew exactly what they were getting once they figured out what my style was and how I approached different topics and subjects. And so I think that's one of the biggest things. You know, I was always one to really look out for the little guy, right? I used to call myself the bully's bully. I didn't go around looking for fights. I ended them. Um, and I guess I could talk about conflict resolution, because in a sense, that's, resolving conflict, but physically. This way, and what I'm talking about is administratively doing it in a different manner, utilizing the tools that are around me, right? So I think that being authentic, and being consistent, and anybody who knows me knows my one word for leadership is consistency. People need to know what they're getting, and they need to know that you're not wishy washy and you're not going to change. And that's part of being authentic. You know, if you're going to be an ass, but people at least know what they're getting. If you're there to help, you can't just help one day and then the next day it's like, nah, it's not good enough. Obviously you're going to help for the right reasons and you're going to do these things for the right reasons. But, one of the things that I've always done was if I was going to help somebody, I never made a promise that I couldn't keep. So essentially, when somebody asked for my help, I always saw what I could do. Utilizing my network, my platform, my credibility, it helped me help others. And that was the authentic side, that people knew when they came to me with a problem, I was going to help them find a solution, or a way to kind of ease the pain and the effort. So I think through that, the ability to be authentic that way really helped. And they knew that the things that I stood for, I wasn't going to waver, So I had male soldiers, female soldiers who would come to me with issues knowing I was going to be able to, provide some insight or give some guidance or help. Usually it was the latter. Usually I'm trying to help in whatever the situation is. And I've been through a lot, and I've been through a lot of different situations, but I don't know everything. And I'll tell people, like, I don't necessarily know the answer to that, but I'll help you find out, right? I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to make something up because it's not authentic. Either I have the answer, I don't have the answer, and I can help in that way. But I think being true to that and not changing or forgetting where I came from, you hear that quite often. I'm looking at a thread right now online in our core that kind of calls some of this stuff out, fraudulent leaders, people kind of, doing things on the backs of others. We're not really a strong core, things like that. I would say that's kind of a myth. There are a lot of great leaders out there who might not necessarily be in influential positions, but there are a lot of great people out there that are doing their best with what they have. So I would say that there are some authentic leaders in our regiment who are, you know, trying to help and trying to do the best that they can with what they have. And I think that, a lot of people are impatient. But I would definitely say that you need to look at what you're doing within the scope of your responsibility and your authorities, right? What kind of climate are you creating in your piece of the pie? Everybody's looking for somebody else to basically save them or change the world. But you can change a lot of things at your level, at your echelon. And that's by having a seat at the table, whatever organization that you're in. And usually you're going to get that through credibility and through authenticity, and being a stand-up individual. So I tell people that, if you're in a combat arms unit and you're just trying to do your job and not be extra value added to that organization, well, you're not going to have the buy-in of that organization to do what you need to do in your specialty. So take for granted instance, if you're in an airborne infantry unit and you're not a jump master, you're not trying to go out with the troops or be on the drop zone or do all these other things, when it's time for you to do your job, they're going to tell you no, because you're not bought into them, and that organization being the main effort, that's what you are there to support. You don't necessarily get to do your job all the time, cool, but you have a job to do. And I think, if you can be authentic in that regard to serve and support this organization, and then in return, I get to do my job because they're bought into the idea that I'm bought into their organization, you got a seat at the table now, right? So your credibility has to match that authenticity in order for you to get what it is that you're trying to get out of that organization. A lot of people are searching for purpose, job satisfaction, a legit purpose, but you're not going to find any of that if you're not willing to put in the work. I see a lot of people, I ask them like, what's your mission here? What are you doing? And it's just complaints. All right. So then I ask them, all right, well, if you get to do your job, what would you do? What's your plan? They don't have a plan. It's like, oh, well, I don't get to do that. I don't get to train. I don't get to do my job. Your job is to prepare to do your job. Your job is to train to do your job. So when you're called upon to execute and you can't, guess what? You just lost credibility. You're not authentic. You're not pure to what it is that you're doing. So you have to stay prepared. If you're trying to get prepared at the time of execution, you just missed the boat. You lost the ride, right? Now you're just going to sit there and just keep rowing because you're not ready. So I would definitely say that, authenticity is important. Credibility is important, when it comes to leadership or being in a leadership role. And everybody in the military is going to be a leader at some point in time, unless we go back to having, technician type ranks where you're just a specialty at your position and not really in charge of anything. You're going to have to have that credibility. You're going to have to be able to create that seat at the table and be authentic, because people can see through that BS. That is the first thing, especially when people are out there, spotlighting. Real leaders can see that. Real leaders can see through that, and it's not authentic. All right. So that's my message for today. If you haven't, like, share, comment, subscribe. You're on the mic with me, JD.